Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Blair Houston Appleton Sr., design futurist, co-founder, CEO, Axumwe Marketplace. Axumwe Marketplace is driving cultural commerce across Africa, connecting 54 countries through digital trade. Last week, we spoke about the history of Africa not being rooted in the transatlantic slave trade, but for more than 5,000 years, anchored in the trading of precious goods and services, including gold, copper, ivory, and the likes, which gave rise to critical African kingdoms that played significant roles in promoting trade between and amongst countries and regions, but also connecting the continent with the rest of the known world. Today, we are continuing that series to talk about intra-Africa trade. In our time, the paradox. Known sources: World Bank, IMF, the African Development Bank, the World Trade Organization, the UNECA, and several other sources have painted a story through their data of a paradox taking place in Africa. Two numbers. The first number, a 14.4%, describes Africa locked in its post-colonial history, when only 14.4% of trading takes place between and amongst African countries, with the rest of the trading taking place between Africa and its colonial masters. This is a number that reminds us that structurally, we are marginalized, with only 5% post-independence contribution to global trade falling to 3.3% today. 14.4% reminds us that Africa has been made to ship its raw material to the West, neglecting the vast opportunity that takes place between and amongst African countries when we trade. The 14.4% reminds us that we lacked the capacity to process our raw materials into finished goods, and for close to half a century, we were regarded as the natural resource base for the vast advancement of civilization in the West post the transatlantic slave trade. It is the 14.4% that reminds us that instead of tapping on the competitive advantage of the natural endowment, converting it from raw materials to finished goods, and empowering our people to make profound economic decisions, we traded that for the so-called relationships that we established and maintained with our colonial masters. But the story is shifting into a hidden number, a new number. Beneath all of the data sources, all of the analysis, all of the trends there is the emergence of a secret code, a code that is rewriting a new destiny for Africa. It is a code that is telling a new story. It is a new number, a number that speaks of the vast potential and a new future for Africa. It is a number that comes deeply from analyzing those figures, trends, case studies coming out of the known sources. It is a number that I am proud of, 45%. Africa's new number, 45%, speaks of the percentage of manufactured goods that are trading between and amongst African countries over the last 2 years. 45% of trade that takes place between and amongst African countries constitute finished, manufactured, finished, processed goods. 45%. As compared to 20% of manufactured finished goods as Africa trade with the rest of the world. That is a magic number. Africa is proving that when we trade between and amongst ourselves, we trade in high value industrial goods and services. But when we trade with the West, we trade raw materials locked in post-colonial eras, treated as the resource basket of the world and having no significant share or say in the profits that emerge from those sales. But in the midst of all of these is a stark reminder that trading between and amongst African countries is costing 50% more than the global average. Poor infrastructure adds an additional 29% price premium. All of these are hindering trade between and amongst African countries. Combined with this is the capital deficit of $100 billion that African businesses need to facilitate global trade. And these gaps are presenting hideous challenges to trading and doing business across Africa. But that does not deter us, because it's only a few years with the AfCFTA, and a 45% has emerged as the magic number, the number of inspiration, the number of hope, the number of aspiration, the number of solidarity, the 45%. Now this gives the foundation, the basis for why the AfCFTA will win. The AfCFTA will win because the numbers are pointing to the fact that when we trade with each other, we trade high value, we trade finished goods, we trade the value addition. We do not trade in deficit, we trade in surplus. This is the future we seek. This is why Axumwe is for the first time connecting 54 countries across the African continent through digital trade, attempting to overcome the hurdles of trade, Despite that, Axumwe is connecting families to opportunities, macro traders to national, regional, and global markets, connecting diaspora Africans to their traditional sources of goods. This is why Axumwe is reaching out its hand and calling on all who aspire to drive trade across Africa, who aspires to see progress across Africa, to come and invest in Africa. Join us and be a part of this movement. Africa is rewriting its history. Africa is taking charge of its destiny. Africa is saying enough is enough. I call on all well-wishers of Africa to join in this movement and take advantage of the vast opportunities. Only 7% of trade in Africa is in service. And that is a massive gap. It's a massive opportunity that we can take advantage of. 45% manufacture goods. And that gives us 55% to capture. It is an opportunity. Only 14.4% trade still takes place between and amongst African countries. It is an opportunity, not a challenge. I thank you.